Learn how to create a custom blog with HTML and CSS in this full course from Julio Codes.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Julio, and in today's lesson, you will build a responsive website from scratch. Before I give you an overview of the project, I want to thank freeCodeCamp.org for lending me their platform and allowing me to share my knowledge with you today. Now, let's take a look at the project that you will build. First, let's go over the header. The header section holds the navigation and all of its items. Here we have the theme toggle button. This button will transition the color scheme into the light theme. We will use JavaScript to store the theme selection within local storage. This means that your theme selection will remain active even if you close the page or the browser. Then we have the search button. When clicked, a pop-up will be activated and the search bar will show. You have two options for closing the pop-up. You can either click on the close icon or hit the escape key on your keyboard. Moving on, we have a sign in and sign up button. These buttons do not lead anywhere, but if you wanted to build upon this project, you could create pages for these buttons. Also, we have a cool hover effect on the sign up button. For some of you, this might look familiar. In fact, the entire dark theme might look familiar, and this is because I use CodePen.io's color scheme for inspiration. Then we have the main section. This section will be a grid that is split into two sides. Here, we will have nested grids as well. On the left, we will utilize grid to position the items in a way that will allow us to create a really nice looking layout. Then on the right side, we have a sidebar. If we come down here, we have the quick reach section. We will utilize a JavaScript library called Swiper to create a responsive carousel. Swiper has many functionalities. However, we will only be taking a look at responsive breakpoints and how to make the arrows and pagination work. Then we have the older post section. This section is composed of 6 cards, though you could show as many as you wanted. Towards the bottom, you have the See More button, and this button would allow you to either show more posts or navigate to a specific page. The next section is for the popular tags. This section is composed of 6 cards. Ideally, when clicking any of the cards, it would take you to a page where you would see posts specifically for this category. Then we move down to the newsletter section. Here we have a call to action, prompting users to subscribe to the newsletter if they wanted to. Then the last section will be a modern looking footer. I also wanted to show you the second page, the blog post page, because aside from the landing page, it would only make sense that we also build a blog post page. To access this page, let's go back up to the first section. Then we can click either of these 3 main cards. Although the page for the post is basic, you have a lot of room here for making this page more complex if you wanted to. Let's go ahead and take a look at the responsive view. Let's start with the navigation. Then let's scroll down and take a look at the rest of the layout and how it changes and adjusts with the width of the viewport. Lastly, I wanted to point out that I have a YouTube channel of my own. If you enjoy this type of content, be sure to give me a follow. Without any further ado, let's begin. Let's quickly go over the files that you're going to be getting. So if you go to the link listed in the description of this video, you're going to be able to download the completed files as well as the starter files. I decided to include the completed files just in case you run into issues. This way you can just compare the code. Now I'll just close this and then go inside of the starter files. So if you plan on following along, make sure that you pause the video, grab the assets, and once you're ready, let's begin. Let's begin by going over what we have here within the index.html. So this is just a basic HTML5 template. Here we link to the favicon, which is this little icon that we have here. Then down here, we link to the remix icons, which is the icons that we are going to be using. Then we link to the SwiperJS CSS file, and then we link to our own CSS. Inside of the body here, we just have several comments for each individual section. And then we do the same thing down here. Instead of linking to the CSS, we just link to the JavaScript files. So the first thing that we are going to do here is go inside of the header. Actually, let me open up this project with Live Server first, just so that we can see the changes as they happen. I'm also going to keep the completed project here opened, just so that we can use it as a reference. So first, let's tackle the header. And inside of the header, we just have the navigation and all of its items. So we're going to use the header element. Then we will apply a class of header as well as an ID of header. The ID, I'm only going to be using it so that I can select this element as well as other elements through JavaScript. You can do this with the class and even the tag name. However, I opted out to use the IDs instead for this purpose. Inside of the header, I'm going to use the nav element. I'm going to apply the class of navbar as well as a class of container. The container class will limit how wide a particular element is going to stretch to. Inside of the nav, I'm going to have a logo, so I'll use an anchor tag. I will point this back to the index.html, and then inside of it, I'm going to have an h2 that will have the class of logo and the name of the website. Then I'm going to have a div with the class of menu as well as the ID of menu. Inside of this div, I'm going to have a UL with the class of list, and then inside of it, an li with the class of list item, and then inside of the list item, an anchor tag with the class of list link. So now that we have the base for the list items, all I have to do is just copy this and paste it down below as many times as we need. So we're just going to set up a few for now, and then we'll add the rest later. Also, the main reason why I'm wrapping this list inside of this menu is because it's going to make the reset when we transition from mobile to larger screens a lot simpler. So for the first one, we also want to add an additional class of current, since it will be highlighted, and this will be home. Then we have categories. Then we have reviews, news, membership, contact, and then here we have the sign in link, and we need one more for sign up. I also want to add an additional class here. This class will be screen LG hidden. And I'm going to apply this class to the sign up button as well. So the main reason is because these are the links that will show up within the mobile navigation that you see right here. So these are normal links. And then when we get to the larger screens, we hide them from here, and then we show the fancy ones instead. So let's go back here, make this smaller, and I'm probably going to give myself some more space. So I'm going to close this sidebar here by using Control B, just like so. Now, something else that I want to do is I want to now exit this menu div, and underneath, I'm going to add the rest of the buttons that we have here. So to do so, let's find the closing tag for this menu div. And underneath, we are going to have another div. This one will have the class of list as well, because I want to share some of the styles without having to override the existing styles for this link, for this list, I should say. So that's why I'm also going to give this the class of list right. And in here, we are just going to have a lot of buttons. So we are going to start by using the button element, and we will apply the class of btn, a class of place, items, center, and then an ID of theme toggle btn. And inside of here, we will have two icons. So the first icon will have the class of array sun line. Then I'm going to add a secondary class just so that I can manipulate this element by using this secondary class. So I'm going to call this sun icon. Then we are going to duplicate this down below and we are going to edit it. So for this one, we can say moon icon, and then we can change sun to moon as well. And if we go back to the original project here, you'll see that the button is now visible and we have the two icons that we want. Later on, we are going to hide one of these icons so that only one is visible at a time. So now that we have the base for the buttons, what I'll do is go ahead and copy this. Again, let's just be a little bit lazy here. And then I'm going to modify this element to fit our need. And for this one, we will have the search icon. So this can remain the same. The only difference here is that we're going to get rid of this ID. So instead of this ID, we are going to use search icon, just like so. Or we could even do search icon btn. It doesn't really matter. Then in here, we can go ahead and get rid of one of the icons since we only need one. And then we can go ahead and change the class. So this one is going to be array search line, just like so. And now we get the other button. So we need one more here. And this button is going to, let me actually copy it again. Then I'm going to paste it below here. And here we're going to have to make some changes as well. So for this particular button, I'm also going to add a class here of screen LG hidden because I don't want to see this particular button on larger screens since the menu is going to be fully visible. I'm also going to add a class here of menu toggle icon. And then for the ID, we can just go ahead and change this as well to menu toggle icon. We will also have two icons in here. One is going to be for the hamburger menu and the other one is going to be for the X. So here we can just go ahead and modify the classes. This one for the hamburger menu will have the class of array menu and then 3 line. And that's already going to show up there. Then we need an additional class called open menu icon. Then what we can do is copy this and replace the one below it and then make changes here. So we can change this one to close and then we can get rid of 3 and make it so that it says close line. And then here we can change open to close, just like so. Finally, we need the other two buttons. So that would be the ones we have here that we are going to show within the larger screens. And to do that, we are going to be using anchor tags instead. The anchor tag is going to have the class of list link, again, because I want to share the same styles that the list links have. Then I'm going to have an additional class of screen SM hidden. And this is going to do the opposite, which is just going to hide this particular item on smaller screens. And then here we can say sign in and then copy this underneath. And here we want to add an additional class of btn and then sign up btn. And we'll also add a class here of fancy border, just like so. And inside of here, we are going to copy the text, then remove it, and then place a span inside of it, followed by the text. And this is going to be pretty much it for the navigation. So the next step would be to go inside of the CSS file so that we can make this look a lot better. So let's go inside of the assets, CSS, and then main.css. And here it's going to be the same deal. We have several comments for each individual section. And then I'm importing the Google font of Poppins that we are going to be using. So let's go ahead and initialize some custom properties inside of the root pseudo class. And this just means that any variable that I initialize in here is going to be available for use within the CSS file. So think of it as global scoping. As far as the naming convention, you want to start with 2 hyphens and then the name of the variable. So I'm going to call this one light color, just like so. And then we simply store the value of the color that we want. We will have another one. This one will be light color alt. And then it will have the following hex of A, FB, 6C, D. Then we will have another one down here. And this one is going to be for the primary background color. And it's going to have the following value. So this one is going to be 13, 14, and then 17. And that's pretty much how it goes. But let me just demo quickly something like, for example, if you wanted to store a font. In this situation, let's say that this is the font family variable that I want to create. And then I just simply do the same thing that I normally would and store the value of Poppins. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Now, I don't want to bore you by having you watch me type every single one of them. So I'm just going to speed up the process, and then I'm going to include all the imports as well as the custom properties within the starter files just to make it easier for you to follow along. So I'll be right back. Alright, so now that the custom properties are set, let's go ahead and apply some base styles. And here, what I like to do is that I start by using the universal selector. Then I go ahead and I apply a margin of 0, a padding of 0, and then the box sizing, I set it to border box. And this just makes it so that the math when sizing your elements is going to be a lot simpler, since everything such as borders and paddings is going to be calculated on the inside of the element as opposed to the outside of it. Then I'm going to select the HTML document and I'm going to set a font size of 10 pixels. And the reason why I do this is because I prefer using rem units, as you can see from here. And this is just going to be a lot better for responsive design. And by making it 10 pixels is just going to make the math a lot simpler. So for example, if I wanted to do 16 pixels, it's as simple as just doing 1.6 rem. So that's what I mean. That being said, I also want to do the font size in percentages instead. The reason being because it's going to scale a lot better when we use the zoom that we have here within the browser. So 10 pixels in percentages is going to be 62.5%. So I'm just going to comment this one out and keep it as a reference. Now we are going to select the body. And in here, what I want to do is apply the font family custom property. So to apply a custom property, all you have to do is just use var. And then inside of the parentheses, what you want to do is pass in the name of the variable that you created. So in this situation, we will use font family because that's the name of the variable. Then as far as the font size, we will do the same thing. And you don't actually have to type in var every time, at least if you're using Visual Studio Code. So in this case, all you have to do is just type in the name of the variable itself. So for example, I can type in font and you see that we already get some suggestions. I'm going to be using the SM font size here. So if I just hit enter or select it, you see that it already does it for us. Then as far as the color, this one is going to be the light color alt. And then the background color is going to be the primary background color. Then here, I'm going to set a letter spacing of 1 pixel, followed by a transition, which is going to be on the background color. And it will be over 0.25 seconds. I also want to transition the color over 0.25 seconds as well. And this transition is only there for when we toggle between the themes so that we get that really nice animation. Then I'm going to select all of the anchor tags, and I'm going to get rid of the text decoration by saying none. Then I'm going to set the color to be inherited from its parent. I'm going to select all of my images, and I'm going to give them a max width of 100%. This is going to make it so that the images will not overflow their parent container, and then a display of block. I'm going to select all of my ULs, and I'm just going to do a list style of none. I'm going to select my inputs as well as my buttons, and the font here is going to be inherited. So if we hover over, and this should be button, not buttons. So if we hover over the property here, it just tells us that it's a shorthand for font style, font variant, font weight, font size, and so on. Then what I want to do here is apply a color that is going to be inherited from its parent as well. Then the border will be set to none. Then the background color is going to be transparent. And I'm also going to get rid of the outline here. Finally, I'm going to select all of my I tags. And in here, I just want to set a font size, which is going to be MD. So font size, MD, just like so. And now we can go ahead and add the colors for the light theme. So what we are basically just going to do is invert some of the variables that we have right here, and that's going to take care of everything else for us. So here, what I want to do is select the body and say that when the body has the light theme class, I want the following styles to have the following values. And we are going to start with the light color. And in fact, it's going to be a lot easier if I just copy it. So we need primary, secondary. So let me just grab all these for now. And we'll paste them here. Then we also need the hover light color. And we will need the transparent dark and transparent light colors. So now we can go ahead and change the values. So this one here is going to have the following, which is 3D. And then for the light color alt, this one is going to be switched to a transparent color. So this is going to be RGBA. And then we want a black color. So we do 0, 0, 0. And then for the alpha or transparency, we do 0.6. For the primary background color, we're going to be switching this to white. And then for the secondary background color, this is going to be a lighter shade of gray. So this one will be F1, F1, F1. Then for the hover light color, what we want to do here is just set this to white as well. And for the transparent dark color, we want to set this one to a solid. So we will use the color of the secondary background color that we have right here. Just like so. Finally, the last one will stay the same, except that we are going to make the transparency a lot more. So we'll just do 0.1 there. Let's now set up the reusable classes, and we will start by using the class of container. And as I mentioned, this is going to limit how wide a certain element is going to stretch to. So I'm going to make this 160 rem. Then when we have enough space, I also want to center this container in the middle. So I'm going to be using a margin top and bottom of 0 and auto left and right. And then I'm going to create some spacing on the sides by giving it a padding 0 top and bottom and 1.5 left and right. I'm going to target the place item center class. And in here, I'm going to be using flexbox. This is going to be inline flex. Then I want to align items to the center and justify content to the center as well. And there's still a few more things in here that we will target, but we won't do that till later on. So for now, let's just stick to the classes that we have defined. So in this case, I'm going to select the screen SM hidden, and this is going to have a display set to none, simply because we are starting mobile first, and by default, we don't want to see anything with this class. So now let's go ahead and work on the header. Let's select the header element, and in here we are going to apply a background color, which is going to be the secondary background color. Then the position is going to be fixed. What we want to do next is give it a starting top position of 0, and we will do the same for the left. Then we will give this a width of 100%, because since we made it fixed, it now lost its width. And then finally, we will give it a C index of a high value, just so that we make sure that it stays on top of all the content. Now I'm going to target the nav bar. In here, I'm going to set the display to be a flex. I want to align my items to the center, and then I want to justify my content to space between. And that's going to give us some separation here between the items, just like you can see there. So let me just bring this back. And I also want to add some spacing on the top and bottom. So for that, I'm going to be using padding, and we can do a padding block of 1.5 rem as well. Then I'm going to select the logo, and the logo is going to have the font size of font size MD, and the color is going to be white. So we will use the light color. I will now select the menu, and I'm going to give this a position of absolute. The starting top position, I want to position it under the header, so this is going to be 8.5 rem. For the right, I'm going to do the same spacing that I had for the container, just so that it lines up. And then I'm going to do a width of 23 rem. Then a padding all around, and a background color, which is going to be the secondary background color. And here we want to set the opacity to 0. However, opacity only hides the element from view. If I hover over it, you can see that everything's still clickable, which means it's still there. So what we want to do next is transform, scale, and we set that to 0, and it's going to shrink it all the way down so it's no longer clickable. And obviously, we want to still see the menu since we're working on it. This is going to be for JavaScript purposes later on when we hide it and show it. So for the time being, let's go ahead and comment that out. Then we want a transition here, which is going to be for the same purpose of showing and hiding the menu. On the opacity, over 0.25 seconds, ease in. Now I'm going to select the list. And the list is going to have a display of flex. Then I want to align my items to the center as well. And I want to set some spacing, so I will use a gap here as well. And even though it's not looking quite right, the solution to fix this is by applying a flex direction of column. However, I don't want to do this here because remember that we have multiple lists. So if I applied it to this list, then it means that it's going to apply it to every single element that has the same class. And that's not what we want. So let's go ahead and remove this. And instead, I'll specifically apply it to the element that I want to. In this case, it's going to be the list that is a direct child of the menu element. Just like so. And if we go back to the HTML document, here you can see that this list is a direct child of this menu element. So what I want to do next is select the list link that is current. So for this, we just make sure that we chain the two classes together. And here, what we want to do is change the color. So the color here is going to be the light color. So now it's different, well, slightly different from the rest of them. Next, I'm going to remove the close menu icon, which is going to be the X. So let's select the close menu icon and give this a display of none. Now I'm going to select all the BTNs. And what I want to do here is set the cursor to be a pointer so that when we hover over the buttons, we get the appearance that it's clickable. I now want to set some hover effects. So I'm going to select the list link, unhover, and the following styles are going to be applied. So this is just going to be a change of color, which is going to be transitioning to the light color custom property that we have. So if we go ahead and try that out, you can see that it works. However, we still want to apply the same effect to the buttons, and we want to apply it to the span inside of the buttons as well. So we'll do BTN hover and then the span inside of it. And one more thing that I want to do now is hide the moon icon, because by default we are going to be within the dark theme, so we only want to see the sun icon. And we'll just set the display property here to none. Now I'm going to select the light theme and then the sun icon. And this is going to have a display of none. And this just means that when the body has the light theme class, then the sun icon, we no longer want to see it. The one that we do want to see is going to be the moon icon. So we're going to grab this and we'll repeat it for the light theme and then the moon icon. And the only difference here is that we change this one to block so that we show it. Now, you're not going to be seeing that in play right now, but you will later once we get into the JavaScript portion, which is going to be shortly. But before that, let's set up the styles that we are going to trigger once we get to the JavaScript portion. So that's going to be down here. And the first thing that I want to do is add a box shadow to this header once we start scrolling. So let's target the header. And then we'll say that when the header is activated, or when it has the class of activated, we want to apply a box shadow, which is going to have a value of 0 for the X offset, 1 pixel for the Y offset, and then 0.5 rem for the blur and spread. And then it's going to have a transparent light color. Now we're going to do something similar here for the menu. So let's just copy that. And let's change header to menu. So this is going to be slightly different now because we are going to have 1 pixel here for the X offset as well. And then we'll just change this to 1 and the rest can remain the same. So remember that I said that first we hide this and then we show it on click. So this is where it comes into play. So let's uncomment that out now. And then we are going to copy it and we'll paste it down here. Then we just change the 0 to 1s. Just like so. Then we also want to be able to switch the icons. So the next thing that I'm going to do is select the menu toggle icon. And we are going to say that when it's activated, let's remove the menu class from here because we don't need it. So when it's activated, we want to target the open menu icon. And in here, we want to set the display to none. Then we'll do the same thing for the X. So let's change open to close. And then this one will be block because we do want to show it. So let's go ahead and open up the JavaScript file. And in here, what I'm going to do is define a function that is going to allow us to select elements very easily. And this is going to work similar to how jQuery does it. By the way, shout out to John from Coding Addict. This is the method that he uses. It's actually pretty useful. So we'll start by declaring a function expression, and I'm going to call it select element. And then in here, we can have a parameter of selector. You can call this whatever you want. And it will be an arrow function. And what we want to do in here is define another variable. This one I'm going to call element. And then I'm going to store the value of whatever we pass in into this element variable. So document query selector. And now we pass in the selector. Then what we want to do is add in some validation. So we'll say if element, meaning whether it's true or false. In this case, if it's true, we want to return the element. If not, what we can do is throw an error. So we'll say throw new error, and then we'll use the backticks. And in here, we can have a custom error message. So I'm going to type in something went wrong. Make sure that the selector, this is going to make sure that it tells you which selector it is that is wrong or typed incorrectly based on what we passed in. So make sure that the selector exists or is typed correctly. Just like so. So now we can go ahead and test that out. So we'll call the select element function, and we are going to pass in an element that we know is valid. So in this case, the navbar. Let's also console log that. So let's go ahead and open up the console and see if we get the element that we want. And we do. So here we have the nav element. Now let's see what happens if we add in an element that doesn't exist. So let's say footer. And now you see that we get the error. Something went wrong. Make sure that footer exists or is typed correctly. So now that we know that this is working, we can get rid of this console log and we can move on. So now we can go ahead and add the styles that are going to trigger on scroll to the header. So for this, I'm going to have another function. I will call this one scroll header. And then what I'll do is have another arrow function here. And I'm going to define a variable called navbar element. And then I'm going to call the select element function and pass in the header ID. And I shouldn't call this one navbar element. I should have called that header element. Then underneath, what I want to do is have an if statement to check if the scroll has passed a certain point. And if it does, then we want to do something, in this case, add a class. And if not, we want to remove that class. So we'll say if, then we will use this keyword since this function is going to be attached to the window object, scroll Y. And then we want to check if it's greater or equal to 15. If it is, we want to add a class. And if not, we want to remove that class. So we'll say header element class list and then add activated. So let's go ahead and grab that, paste it underneath, and remove, add, and add, remove. And then we'll scroll to the end here, and we're going to add a demo element. So I'm going to say search. And then within the CSS, I'm going to select it and give it a really high height. So search. And the height is going to be 2000 rem. And now we get the scroll bars and we can test that out. So obviously it's not working because we still haven't called the function. So for that, we are going to attach an event listener to the window object, which is going to be of scroll. And then we just simply pass in this scroll header function. And now if we go ahead and test that out, you can see that it shows up. It's really subtle, so you can't see it all that much. Let me actually demonstrate by adding a background color here of red. So now once we scroll past that 15, you see that we get the background color of red. And if we go back to the start, it goes to the normal color. So this is working. So let's now go ahead and get rid of this as well as this, since we no longer need it. And then we can move along and keep working on the rest. So the next thing that I want to do now is open and close the menu. So we're going to do that down here. We're going to start by defining a variable, which is going to be called menu toggle icon. And then here we just call the select element function again. And we pass in the ID of menu toggle icon. Then what we want to do is create another function, which I'm going to call toggle menu. And this will be another arrow function. And then here, what I want to do is just toggle some classes. So mobile, well, first, let me define a variable so that we can store the menu element inside of it. I'm going to call this one mobile menu. And then we call the select element function once more. Pass in the ID of menu. And now we can do something with it. So mobile menu class list toggle. And then what we can do in here is say that we want to toggle activated. And then what we want to do is just toggle the class list on the menu toggle icon. Which is going to be the same one. Now we're going to call the function. Then add event listener. This one is going to be a click event. And we go ahead and pass in the menu toggle function that we created. Actually, it's the other way around. Toggle menu. So now if we test that out, it should be in working order. There we go. And notice how the icons are being switched as well. Since we're already here, let's go ahead and add the functionality to switch between the themes. So let's start by defining a variable called body element. And then we can just store the body element itself. We don't have to call the function here. We can just simply do document.body. And that's going to work the same way. I need to also create one for the theme toggle btn. And then I'm going to call the function here and store the theme toggle btn in here. Then I'm going to add an event listener to this theme toggle btn variable. And what we want to do in here is toggle the class, the light theme class on the body. So we're going to use the body element, class list, toggle, and then light theme. And this should work now. So if we click it, you see that the theme changes and the icons as well. But if I refresh the page, notice how it disappears. And that's because now we have to add it into local storage so that the theme selection is saved. So how do we do that? Well, as I mentioned, after we click this button, the body is going to have the class list of light theme toggled. So what we have to do now is add some if statements. So here we are going to say that if the body element class list contains the class of light theme. So again, it's saying if the body currently has the class of light theme, then we want to do something. And that something is that we want to set this theme within local storage. So we'll select the local storage interface, and then we'll call the setItem method. And here we just basically have a key value pair. And in this situation, the first value that we pass in, this is going to be the key name. So let me just call this current theme. And then for the name of the value itself, we can just call this theme active. And then for the else condition, we just want to remove this item from local storage if the class is not present. So we are going to call this, paste it down here, and as opposed to saying set item, we just say remove item, and then we just need the current theme here. But that's not going to be enough yet. So let's test it out. If I refresh it, you see that it's still gone. So what we have to do now is get the item that is currently stored within local storage. So for that, let me define another variable up here. And this one, I'm going to call it current theme. And then what we want to do now is get that item from local storage. So we say local storage, and then we use the getItem method to get the current theme that we have stored within local storage. So here we just pass in the name of the key that we have here. And would I put this over here? So here we just say current theme. Now again, that alone is not enough to do anything. So we have to add in another if statement, and we're going to be doing this outside. So here, what we are going to do is say that if there is the current theme within local storage, so we can just say current theme. So if there's a current theme present, we want to make sure that the body has that light theme class. So again, we will just say body element and then class list, add light theme. So let's go ahead and test that out. Well, as you can see, it's already within local storage, so it just changed automatically after Visual Studio refreshed the browser with live server. So as you can see, the theme selection is still there. Same thing will happen if we refresh on the dark theme. So let's quickly go over again what we did. So we defined a variable here to store the body element. Then we did the same thing for the theme toggle btn. Then here we just basically get the current item that we stored within local storage. Then in this if statement, we check if there's a current item, so a current theme in this situation. And if there is, the body element will get the class of light theme, which is going to trigger the light theme styles. Here within the event listener, when this btn is clicked, what will happen is that the body element is going to have the light theme added or removed, depending on if you double click it or not. And again, we check if the body element has that class, and if it does, it's going to be set within local storage, and if it's not, it's going to be removed. So that's basically everything we did there. The next step is going to be going inside of the index.html so that we can work on the search portion of this project. So we'll continue here by having a div with the class of search form container, as well as the class of container and the ID of search form container, just like so. Then inside, we are going to have a div with the class of form container inner. And inside of here, we will have the form itself. So the form is going to have the class of form. The action can be left empty for now since this form is not functional. And then inside of the form, we will have an input that will have the class of form input. This input is going to be of type of text, and it will have a placeholder that will say, what are you looking for? Underneath, we are going to have a button with the class of btn and the class of form btn. And this button is going to be of type submit. Then as far as the inside, I'm going to be placing here a icon, and this icon is going to have the class of ri and then search line, just like so. So for the time being, we can't see it, but that's because it's under this. Then underneath of the form, we are going to have the text that is going to be for the, or press escape to close. So that would be this right here. And this span is going to have the class of form note. And then we can just say, or press escape to close. So now outside of this form container inner, we are going to have another button. This button is going to have the class of btn, form close btn, the class of place items center, and then the ID of form close btn, just like so. And then we'll just put in the X icon. So we'll do ri close line, just like so. So now we can see some of it underneath. And this is going to be it for the form. What we are going to do next is go inside of the main.css so that we can style it. And we are going to begin by selecting the search form container. This is going to have a width of 100%. The height is going to be 100 of the BH. And I'm also going to set a max width here of 100%. Then the background color is going to be the primary background color. Let me get rid of that spacing there. And now the position is going to be fixed. Top starting position will be 0. Left will be 0 as well. C index is going to be a really high value because I want this to be at the top of everything. Then display will be set to flex. Then the opacity here is going to be set to 0. The transform scale is going to be set to 0. And then we want to transition the opacity, and it's going to be over 0.5 seconds. Now, the same concept as before. Let's comment this out for now because we still need to see what we're doing with this form. And then we can continue underneath. So now I'm going to select the form container inner. And this is going to have a margin of auto, and that's just going to center it in the middle, just like so. Then this will have a display of flex. Flex direction will be column, and then I'll add a gap for spacing, and then I want to text align to the center. Now I'm going to select the form itself, and this will just have a display of flex as well. And then I want to justify my content to the center to place it in the middle. Then I'm going to select the inputs, the form input, as well as the form btn, because these styles, they will have it in common. Here, I'm going to give this a display of inline block, just so that it respects the paddings and margins on top. Then I'm going to give this a border, of 2 pixels, solid, and then it's going to be the secondary background color. So now it's taking shape. Then I want to make them a little bit larger, so I'm going to give it a padding all around. And then the color, well, I'm already inheriting the color here, so I don't have to do anything. The next thing that I'm going to do is select the form input by itself. And I want to add the following styles. So the first one is going to be a border right, which is going to be of none. Then what I want to do is give it a width of 100%. Then the background color is going to be the primary background color. Because as it is, it's going to be transparent. And in this situation, I guess we could do without having a background color here since the parent already has it. So we can just get rid of this actually. Now let's select the form BTN. This is going to have a margin left, which is going to be negative 0.5 rem. And that's just going to push it a little bit to the left. Then as far as the border left, we can get rid of it. Then for the background color here, we can just set the secondary background color. And we can do a width of 8 rem. Just like so. Now, as far as the form note, we can do a font size of extra small. And then I want to basically align it all the way to the left. So for that, I can just do align self and then flex end. Then I'm going to select the form close BTN. And here, I'm going to give it a position of absolute. Top is going to be 1.5 rem. The right is going to be 1.5 rem as well. Then the border is going to be 2 pixels, solid, and then we can just do the secondary background color here as well. Then as far as the width, we can do 4 rem. The height is going to be 4 rem as well. And then what we can do is give this a display of flex. Although, never mind, I think we already took care of that with the place items center class, so we don't need this. Because I was just going to do align items center and justify content center. But since that class is already doing that for us, we don't need it. So now we can go ahead and make this functional, meaning by removing and showing this form whenever we click on the search icon. And to do so, let's set up the styles for the form. So what we are going to do here is say search form container. And then when it has the class of activated, we want to set the opacity back to 1 and the transform scale back to 1 as well. So remember, we commented this out. Let's uncomment it out again. And now we get the default behavior. So when we go and set up the JavaScript portion for this, when we click this button, the form should show up. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's scroll all the way down here. And what we are going to do is set up some variables. So the first one is going to be for the form open btn. And then we call the select element function. And we pass in the ID of search icon. Then we're going to duplicate this a couple more times below. This one is going to be for the form close btn. And the last one is going to be for the search form container. Now all we have to do is just switch up the variables. Form, let's say search form container instead. And for this one, we can just switch open to close. Then underneath of here, what I'm going to do is have an event listener that I'm going to be attaching to the form openBTN. And this event listener is going to be of click. Then here we can just have an arrow function. And since we only have one line, we don't really need to use the curly braces here. So we can just straight up say search form container class list, and then add. And what we can do here is say that we want to add the class of activated. So if we go ahead and test that out, now it should work. So it pops up. If we click it, it's still there because we still have to add the other event listener. So for that, it's going to be very simple. I'm just going to duplicate the other one down below, then switch close, open, I should say, switch open to close. And then as opposed to adding, we remove. So now if I click it, it should open. And if I click this button, it should be gone. So the last thing we have to do here is make this functional by removing the class when we hit the escape key. And to do that, what we can do is set an event listener on the window object. So we can say window, add event listener, and this event listener is going to be of key up. And then we can just have an arrow function here. And since it's only one parameter, we can just forget about the parentheses here and just do the parameter itself. And in this case, I'm just going to call this one event. And I'm missing the parentheses here for the event listener. And in here, what we want to do is set up an if statement. And this if statement is going to check whether the key of escape has been pressed. So for that, we can say event.key, and then if it's equal to escape, then we want to do something. In this case, what we want to do is search form container, class list, remove. I guess we could have just copied it from here, but it's too late already. Activated. So let's go ahead and test that out. So if we click it, it will open. If we hit the escape key, it's now closed. So that's pretty much all there is to this portion of the JavaScript. The last thing that we are going to be doing here is for SwiperJS, but we're not there yet, so we're not going to worry about it for now. The thing that we do have to do now is go back inside of the index.html so that we can work on the featured articles section. So let's select the section element, and then we can apply a class of featured articles, as well as a class of section header offset. Inside of here, we will have a div with the class of featured articles container, and then another class of container. Can't get this right. And a third class of dgrid. So the dgrid class is going to turn any element into a grid container. And it's also going to be another one of our reusable classes. Then inside of here, I'm going to have a nested grid. So this one is going to have the class of featured content, as well as dgrid. So in here, I want to have a div. This div is going to have the class of headline banner. And inside of it, I'm going to have the headline itself. So this is going to be in h3 that has the class of headline and the class of fancy border. Inside of it, we will have a span, and the span is going to have the class of place items center. And then for the text, it will be breaking news. Underneath, we are going to have another span, this one with the class of headline description. And then we can say Apple announces a new partnership. Underneath of the headline banner, we are going to have all of the cards. So for this, we will use an anchor tag. This anchor tag is going to have the class of article. Then it will have the class of featured article, and then an additional class of featured article 1. Then we can just link to the post page, and then we can move on. So inside of here, I'm going to have an image. This image is going to have the class of article image. And the image that I want to use is going to be inside the assets folder, images folder, then featured folder, and then featured 1. Under the image, I'm going to have a span, and this span is going to have the class of article category. And for the text here, we can just use anything. So underneath of the span, I'm going to have another wrapper div, and this one is going to have the class of article data container. Inside of it, I'm going to have another div. This one is going to be for the article data. And I'll have 3 spans in here. So what I want to do is add some text in here. And then for the middle one, we can add a class of article data spacer. And then the last one will be the estimated read time. Finally, underneath, we are going to have an H3, and this H3 is going to have the class of title as well as the class of article title. SBR, the future. And that's going to be the base for every single card that we have. So let's go ahead and copy this one, and we can paste it underneath 3 more times. Well, 2 more times since we only have 3 of them. And now we can just go ahead and change the data. So for this one, we can change the image to number 2, as well as the featured article to number 2. And then the last one will be 3. Just like so. So now I'm debating whether I should go inside of the CSS and make this portion look better, or if I should add in the rest, which is going to be the sidebar. So for now, I'm guessing that I can just go ahead and just do the CSS for this portion, and then I can come back once I do that. So let's go inside of the CSS now, and let's make this look better. So let's scroll all the way back up to the reusable classes, and what I'm going to do here is find the reusable classes comment, and I'm going to add in the dgrid class. Then I'm also going to add a class for the sections, which we still haven't used. And I'm going to add padding top and bottom here. So I'm just going to use the padding block instead. I was going to do this later, but might as well just do it now and get it out of the way. So now here, what we want to do is select the featured articles. And I'm going to give this a padding block of 2 rem. Then I'm going to select the section header offset. And this is going to have a margin top of 7.4 rem. And that's going to push the content down underneath of the header. The next thing that I want to do is select the featured articles container. as well as the featured content, since they both share the same gap. Underneath, I'm going to select the headline banner, and this will have a background color of secondary background color. Display will be flex. Align items will be center. And then to create some separation between the two texts, I'm going to also give this a gap. And then the font size is going to be extra small. Now I'm going to select the headline by itself, and this is going to have a color, which is going to be the light color. Then I'm going to give this a font size of 1 rem, text transform of uppercase, and then text align is going to be center. Then I'm going to give it some padding of 0.4 rem and a height of 100%. I'm now going to select the headline span, and this is going to have a height that is inherited. And I'm giving this a position of relative, as well as the overflow of hidden. Then underneath, I'm going to select the fancy border once more, and I'm going to create a pseudo element. So we have to add in the content, which is going to be an empty string. If we don't add this, then the element is not going to show up. Then the position of absolute, top starting position 0. Same thing for the left. And then the width is going to be double. So I'm going to do 200% just so that this element is twice as large. Then the height is going to be 100%. Then the background is going to be the gradient color. Then the background size will be 50%, 100%. So now we get a nicer layout here for the background colors. Then I'm going to give this a C index, which is going to be 5. And then underneath, I'm going to select the fancy border span. And this is going to have a position of relative because I want to add a C index of 10 so that it sends the text to the top of the background. Then this is going to get a display of inline block. Actually, I'm going to do display inline flex. And then I'm going to set a padding, which is going to be 0.6 top and bottom, 1.5 left and right. Finally, I'm going to give this a background color, which is going to be the secondary background color. Now, don't mind too much that it looks squished up there. The reason why it looks like that is because I'm zooming in 150%. If I made this smaller, you see that it looks just fine. So the next thing that I'm going to do now is select the article title. Actually, before I select the article title, let me actually style the article itself. So the article here is going to have the position of relative, since I'm going to have some elements that will have position absolute inside of it. And then I'm going to set a min height. So this is the minimum height that each item is going to have. And for that, we will use the variable of item min height md. Then I'm going to select the article image. And this will have a position of absolute. Then I'm going to give this a width of 100%, the height of 100% as well, and then we can do object fit of cover, just so that the image is going to scale a lot better within its box. Then I'm going to do a transition on the transform over 0.25 seconds. And this is going to be for the hover effect, where the image is zoomed in when we hover over it. This isn't going to take effect now, but it will later down the line. So the next thing that I want to target is the article category. And this will have the position of absolute. Top is going to be 1 rem. Right, 1 rem as well. Then padding all around will also be 1 rem. Font size, 1 rem. And then the background color is going to be the primary background color. Next, I'm going to set a color of light. And I'm going to also set a text transform of uppercase, followed by a C index of 10. The next thing that I'm going to style is the article data container. And this will have a position of absolute as well, because we are going to be positioning it to the bottom. And then the bottom is going to be set to 0. Left, 0 as well. Padding is going to be 2 rem top and bottom, 1.5 rem left and right. Background color is going to be the transparent background color. And it should be dark color, not the light one. And then a C index here as well of 10, just so that it stays on top of the other content. Now, since we have the position of absolute here, it's only taking up as much space as it needs. So let's make sure that we also give this a width of 100%. Just like so. We also want to add a hover effect here, so let's add a transition so that the hover is animated, and this will be on the background color. And it will be over 0.5 seconds. Just like so. So the next thing that I'm going to do is add the hover effects themselves. So I'm going to select the article, and I'll say that when the article is hovered, I want to target the article data container. So the background color here is now going to be the hover background color for the dark color. And then the color itself is going to be hover light color. So if we go ahead and try that out, you see that we now get the solid background color here. Now let's target the article data. And what we want to do here is give this a display of flex. And then we want to align items to the center. Then we will apply a gap for separation. And then we are going to apply a font size, which is going to be extra small. Finally, I'm going to add a margin bottom for additional separation between this text and the title. And it's going to be 1 rem. Just like so. Now we are going to generate the article spacer. And this will have a width of 0.5 rem, height of 0.5 rem as well. Then the background color is going to be the light color alt. And finally, what we want to do is rotate it by 45 degrees. So transform, rotate 45 degrees. And that's now going to look more like a little diamond. And the next thing that I want to target now is going to be, well, as you can see, the hover effect is not applying to this element. So what we have to do is come back here. Then we can get rid of this. We can switch this over to, well, I got rid of the curly brace there for no reason. But now we switch dark to light, and we switch this to the spacer class. And now if we hover over it, it should work, and it does. So let's go back down and let's now style the title. The title is going to have the color of light color. And now you see the difference between this text and the title when it's not being hovered. And one last thing is going to be the article title itself. And this is just going to have a font size of MD. Just like so. So next we are going to work on the sidebar, but before we actually do anything with the CSS, what we have to do is jump back inside of the index.html so that we can write the markup for it. So let me make a comment here, sidebar. And under here, we are going to start by having a div with the class of sidebar as well as the grid. And then inside of it, we will have an h3. This h3 is going to have the class of title and featured content title, trending news, and should only be trending. Then here we are going to have the card itself. For this, we will use an anchor tag again with the class of trending news box. So we can use a placeholder there. And then inside of it, we will have a div with the class of trending news image box. Inside of here, we will have a span that has the class of trending number. We will have an additional class of place items center. And then this is going to be 0, 1. Then we will have the image that will have the class of article image. We can go inside of the assets folder, images folder, and then trending. And it's going to be the first image. Underneath of the trending news image box, we are going to have another div, and this div is going to have the class of trending news data. And we already have the base for this article data since we are going to repeat it. So let's just copy that and we can paste it in here. Then underneath, we are going to have an h3, and this h3 is going to have the class of title as well as the class of article title. We already had this as well, so I guess we could have copied it, but kind of late now. Then we can just do sample article title, just like so. And again, this is the base for each individual card that we are going to have. So we can just copy the anchor tag, and then we can just paste it underneath as many times as we need. So in this case, we had 5, and that should be the last one. So now we can just go ahead and change the images. 4, 3, and 2, because we already have one at number 1. Let's also go ahead and change the text. And this is going to be number 4. And finally, number 5. So that's going to be it for each individual card that we are going to have inside of the sidebar. So it's going to be the same deal now. What we have to do is go inside of the CSS so that we can style it. So let's go ahead and select the sidebar. This will have a background color, which is going to be the secondary background color, padding all around of 2.5 rem. Then underneath, I'm going to select the trending news box. This will have a display of flex, flex direction, column, and then the gap for separation. And underneath, I'm also going to add some padding top and bottom. So I'm going to do padding block of 2 rem. Then finally, I'm going to add a border, which is going to be 1 pixel solid. And then it's going to be the transparent light color. And now I'm going to select the trending news box, which is the last one. So trending news box last of type. And what we are going to do is that we are going to get rid of this border bottom. So border bottom, none. And I know you can't see it right now, but that's because we haven't added the position of relative to this image box that we have here. But we're going to be taking care of that right now. So trending news image box. Now you'll see that the moment I give it the position of relative, it's going to fix itself. And that's because this image right here, if you remember correctly, this particular class, we added the position of absolute. So it just needed the class of relative so that this image would be positioned absolutely relative to this div. So if we go back in here, I'm going to give this a width of 100%. Then I'm going to give it a height. And this height is going to be the item min height SM. And now I'm going to go ahead and select the featured content title. And this will have a font size of MD. It will also have a text align of center and then a padding all around of 1 rem. Next, I'm going to select the trending number. This will have a position of absolute. And then the top, -1 rem. Left is going to be -1 rem as well. C index of 15. Then a width of 3 rem. Height is going to be 3 rem as well. The background color is going to be the secondary background color. And then the color itself is going to be the light color. What I want to do next is give it a border radius of 50% to make it round. Just like so. And the last thing that I'm going to do here is select the trending news data article title. Article title. And this is going to have a font size of SM. I'm also going to add a hover effect here. So trending news box unhover. I want to target the article title. And then the color here is going to be the light color. Well, first we have to specify that it's a color before we actually use the variable. So light color, and it's going to be the alt, just like so. So now you see that if we hover over it, we get the effect that we want. So let's compare with the original. As you can see, this one is still slightly smaller. So let me double check that. Well, the reason is because this one is at 150%. The original that I have here for the demo is at 150%. And then the original project is at 100%. So if we make it the same size, you see that now they both look pretty similar. And except for the text right here, because I'm just doing the same one that I had before from copying and pasting. Again, text doesn't really matter. That can easily be changed. So now the next part is going to be working on the quick read section. So back inside of the index.html, what we are going to do here is lay out the markup. So first, let's begin by having a section element that will have the class of quick read. And it will also have a class of section. Inside of it, I'm going to have the class of container. And then in here, I'm going to have an h2 with the class of title. And then a class of section title. I'm also going to apply a data attribute here. So I'm going to call this one data name. And what I'm going to say inside of here is the name of this element, which is going to be the quick read. And then inside of here, I'm going to have the same thing. And that's because we have over here the title set up this way, where we have a faded one that is going to be slightly larger in the back. And for that, we are just going to be using this data element within the pseudo element. So maybe I should just bring this over back one line, just like so. And now we can lay out the markup for the swiper. So in order to start this, we are going to have a div that will have the class of swiper. And these are all the swiper classes. So this is basically the structure for a swiper carousel. Then I'm going to have a div that will have the class of swiper wrapper. Inside of here, I'm going to have each individual card. So this one is going to have the class of article, because we still want to share those styles of the article. And then it needs the swiper class of swiper slide. Then inside of here, well, we can just use a placeholder there. And inside of the anchor tag, we are going to have an image. This image is going to have the class of article image. Then we can go inside of the assets folder, images folder, and then we can go inside of the quick read folder and we can grab the first image. Then underneath of this image, we need another article data container. And in fact, what we can just do is go and get it from the first one that we had here. So article data container. So now we can just speed up the process and paste it over here. Let me just make sure that everything is correct. So we have the article data container. Then inside of it, we have the article data, the spacer, and then the title itself. So that's going to be our first slide. Let me just create some separation there so that it's more readable. So let's go ahead and add another one. Another one, another one, another one, and another one. So now what we have to do is just go ahead and add the images. So for the first one, we already have that image covered. For the second one, we have number 2. Then we have number 3. Number 4. Number 5. And number 6. And that's pretty much going to be the structure for the slides. What we are going to do now is add the navigation buttons, which is going to be the right and left arrows, as well as the pagination controls. So we actually have to add those underneath of this div, which is going to be this swiper wrapper. And this will have the class of swiper button prev. So again, and this will have the class of swiper button prev. And we also want to add an additional class here of swiper controls. Now the swiper controls class is my own class that I will be using to style the arrows. Then we can just go ahead and duplicate this down below. And then we can change this one to next. The last thing that we have to add is the pagination. As you can see, the icons are already showing up here. So for the pagination, we have to add a div that will have the class of swiper pagination. Just like so. So that's going to be it for this particular section. Now the next step is going to be going inside of the CSS, and we are going to make this look slightly better, and then we are going to tackle the JavaScript portion. So down here, we are going to select the section title, and this is going to have the position of relative. It's going to have the font size of font size MD, then a margin bottom, which is going to be 6 rem. And now I'm going to create the pseudo element for it. So section and title before. Actually, I'll just use the after. Well, let's just keep before since it's actually behind it. So as far as the content here, what we can do is use the attribute and then data name, just like so. So the font size here is going to be the font size large. And then we can text transform to uppercase. The opacity here is going to be 0.1 so that it's faded. And position is going to be absolute. And then it will be positioned 1.4, 1.5 rem, I should say, from the top. And then from the left by 2 rem. So if we scroll a little bit up, we should be able to see that right here now. Then I'm going to target the article and then the swiper slide. So we have to do it this way, being more specific in order to actually override some of the styles that the swiper CSS file has. So here the height is going to be 40 rem, just like so. So the next thing that I'm going to do is add some additional styles here for the swiper wrapper. And the height is going to be auto. Then the swiper controls. What I want to do here is give it a width of 3.5 rem. I will do the same thing for the height. And then the background color is going to be the secondary background color. Then what I'll do is select the swiper controls once more. And then what I want to do is select the after pseudo element that swiper actually creates. So the font size here is going to be 1.6 rem, and that's going to make the controls smaller, or the arrows, I should say. And then for the color, we are going to make it white as opposed to blue. So we are going to use the light color. And you probably noticed that the pagination bullet points are not showing up, and that's because for them to show up, we have to first initialize swiper. So let's go back inside of the main.js, and the first thing we have to do here is define a constant variable, which we are going to call swiper, and then we have to create a new instance of swiper. Then in here, we can just select the div that we have with the class of swiper, and then we can pass in some options. So the way it works is by having key value pairs. So to show a certain amount of slides per view, in this situation by default we have 1. So I'm going to set that here, slides per view. Then we set that to the number that we want. Then the next value is going to be for the spacing that I want between each slide. So the default spacing that I want is going to be 20. So for this, we use space between. Then here we are going to make the arrows functional. So we have to set the navigation here. And we have to specify the values. So in this situation, for the next EL property, what we want to set is the swiper class for a particular button. So this one is going to be for the next element. So here we set the swiper, next, actually button, next. Then we do the same thing for the previous button. So this one we can change to prev. And then we have to change this one from next to prev as well. And let's not forget to add a comma here and one here as well. Well, this is the last one, so we don't need it there. We do need it here though. So the next thing that I want to add and make functional is going to be the pagination. So for that, we say pagination, and then we just set that to the element that we have for the pagination. So that's going to be the div that has the class of swiper pagination. And then here we just say el, and then we select the div with the class of swiper pagination. And just like so, now the pagination is showing up. And this should work already. As you can see, we can also drag it. So the next thing that I want to add here is going to be the responsive breakpoints. So for this, we can just specify that we want to set breakpoints. And then here we can set various different numbers. So my breakpoints are going to be 700. And in here, what I want to do is just show a certain amount of slides per view. So let me just copy this, paste it in here, and I want to show 2. Then for the next breakpoint, let me just paste this one down below. This breakpoint is going to be 1200. And then I just want to show all 3 slides. So if I go ahead and make this bigger now, you'll notice that it works just fine. Now we get 2, and then we get 3. So that's working exactly how we want it to work. So one more thing that I have to do is style the bullet points here for the pagination. So let me just minimize this, put this here to line it up. And now since we are done with the whole SwiperJS thing, what we can do is go back inside of the CSS. And then here we can set the styles for the bullet points. So I'm going to start here by selecting the swiper pagination. And I'm going to give this a margin bottom. Well, not a margin bottom, but a bottom position of 0.5 rem. And we also have to specify that this is important to override it from the swiper CSS file. Next, I'm going to select the swiper pagination and then bullet. So this is not an element that we defined. It's actually coming from the SwiperJS CSS file. And I just noticed that I misspelled bullet here. Should be like this. And here we just change the background color to the light color. And now everything is working exactly how we want it to work. So the next step is going to be going back inside of the index.html so that we can work on the older post section. So let's scroll down and go inside of this comment. So this section is going to be pretty straightforward since we are going to be reusing some of the elements that we already created before. The only difference is that we are going to have some slight modifications. So let's begin by using the section element. Then let's apply the class of older post as well as the class of section. And inside of here, we are going to have a div with the class of container, and then followed by the h2 that has the class of title as well as the class of section title. Then here we can say older posts, and let's not forget the data attribute. So data name, older posts. So let's scroll that down. It now shows up here. Then here we are going to have another container. This one is going to have the class of older post grid wrapper, as well as the class of the grid. And then here, this is where we are going to have each individual card. So again, we will use an anchor tag with the class of article, as well as a class of dGrid, since we also want to make this particular card a grid container. And then we can use a placeholder here. And then inside of it, we are going to have a div that has the class older pose article image wrapper. I know that was a long one. Then inside of there, we are going to have an image that has the class of article image. And then the image that we want is going to be inside of the assets folder, images folder, older pose, and then it's going to be the first image. Underneath, we are going to have the same article data container that we had before. So let's actually grab that instead from here. And the only difference here is that we are going to have a p tag that has the class of article description, just like so. And then we can just generate some dummy text. Let me make that smaller, cut it about here. And now that we have the basic structure, we can just go ahead, copy this anchor tag and paste it down below 5 times, just like so. And now the only thing we have to do is just change the images. So this one should be 6, this one 5, 4, 3, and 2. So now that we have all of the cards here with each individual image, the last thing that we are going to do here is add in the see more button. So underneath of here, we are going to have a div that has the class of see more container. Then inside, we will have an anchor tag that has the class of btn, see more btn, and place items center. Then this can just be a placeholder, and then see more, followed by the icon, which is going to be the arrow right. So array, arrow, right, S, line. And now we are done with this section. So let's quickly go inside of the main.css and let's make it look better. So let's go ahead and select the older post grid wrapper and let's apply a gap. And then we'll select the older post article image wrapper as well as the older post article. Then let's apply a min height, which is going to be the item min height of SM. Now I'll select them individually, so older post, article, and I will set a background color, which is going to be the secondary background color. You're not going to see a show through, and that's because the article data container already has a background color, but we're going to reset that later. So now I'll select the older post article image wrapper, and I'm going to set the position here to be of relative. Then we are going to apply the reset to the older post grid wrapper and then the article data container. So here we just reset the position to static from absolute, and then here the background color is going to be transparent. So now the secondary background color should be shown through, and that's because we messed it up here. We should have selected the article data container instead. So now it works. Underneath of that, I'm going to apply some margin bottom to the article title that is inside the article, the older post grid wrapper, I should say. So article title. And this will have the margin bottom of SM. And then down here, I'm going to do the same thing, but it's going to be for the see more container. And what I'll do now is scroll all the way to the bottom. And then I'm going to give this a margin top instead, which is going to be the margin MD. And that's going to give us some additional separation. Next, I'm going to select the Seymour BTN. And this is going to have a text transform of uppercase. Then I'm going to select the Seymour button on hover. And I don't think I do need one though. Yeah, because I already have it applied globally. So let's just leave that out. So what I do want to set, so what I do want to set is the animation when we hover over it, that the arrow is going to move a little bit to the right. So to do that, what I have to do is say see more, and then the icon, and I want to set a transition here, which is going to be on the transform over 0.25 seconds. And now I can say that when the see more BTN is hovered, I want to target the icon inside of it, and then I want to transform, translate X over 0.5 rem. So let's test that out. And as you can see there, it works. So that's going to be it for this particular section. The next one is going to be the popular tags. So let's go back inside of the index.html and let's find the popular tags comment. So let's go ahead and add the section element and then add the class of popular tags, as well as a class of section. Then inside of it, we will have a div with the class of container. And then we will have the same title that we have been reusing. So let's just be a little bit lazy here and copy this portion as well as this one. Then we'll scroll back to the bottom and then we'll paste it in. And let's close this one off, just like so. So for this one, we are going to change the class. And this class is going to be popular tag, or popular tags, I should say, container. And then the dgrid class can stay there. Now, as far as this one, we have to rename the data attribute to popular tags. And then we'll do the same thing. Well, let's remove the hyphen here and capitalize the P. And then we can just copy this and paste it in here. So that should work. Then inside of this container that we have here, what we are going to do is add an anchor tag with the class of article. And then inside of it, well, we can use a placeholder here. And then inside of it, we can use a span that has the class of tag name. And then here we can just say travel. Then underneath, we are going to have an image. This image is going to have the class of article image. And the image is going to be inside of the assets folder, images folder, and then tags. And then this one is going to be the travel image. So that's going to be the basic structure for every single card that we are going to have inside of the popular tags. So let's go ahead and copy this and paste it down below 5 more times. Just like so. Well, we need 6, so we need 1 more. So now we can go ahead and just change the text inside of it as well as the images. So the second one is going to be food. Let me actually capitalize here. So food. Do the same here. And then this one is going to be the food tag. And I'm not sure if that's what I named it, so let's find out. So yep, that's going to be the one. Then the third one is going to be technology. Here we'll do the same. Then we'll do the same for the fourth one, which is health. Then the fifth one is going to be nature. And finally, we have fitness. So all of our images are now there. Let's go ahead and go inside of the CSS file now so that we can make this look better. So in here, what we will do is target the popular tags container. We are going to apply a gap for separation. Then we are going to target the popular tags container article. And what we are going to do here is give this a min height as well. And this one is going to be SM. Then I'm going to select the tag name. And this will have a position of absolute. Then I'm going to also add a C index here of 10 so that now the item is going to show up on top of the image. And then I'm also going to place it in the middle by using top 50%, left 50%, and then transform translate negative 50%, and then negative 50%. Now I'm going to add a background color, which is going to be the transparent dark color. And that's pretty much all we need for that. Actually, one more thing that we do need here is a padding. So the padding is going to be 1 rem top and bottom, 2 rem left and right. Then what we are going to do is select the popular tags container, the article inside of it, and we are going to add a hover effect so that when we hover over it, the tag name is going to change colors. So popular tags container, article, unhover, and then tag name. So here we want to change the color to the light color. And if we test that out, you can see that it works. Next, I want to add a hover effect to the image. So again, I'm going to copy this, paste it down below, and now I'm going to change this to be the article image. And should be article image, just like so. And then what I do want to change here is the transform scale. And what I want to do is scale it by 1.05. So if we go ahead and hover over it now, you can see that it grows, but there's an issue here because it's overflowing. So we have to go back to this article right here and give it an overflow of hidden. Now, if we go ahead and take a look at the hover effect, notice how much nicer it looks. The next section is going to be the newsletter section, and this one is going to be the easiest one since we will be reusing a lot of the styles that we already had for this search form. So let's begin by using the section element with the class of newsletter, as well as a class of section. In here, we will have a div that has the class of container, and then the h2 with the class of title, as well as section title. This will be newsletter. And let's also add the data name. So we can just go ahead and copy this and paste it in here. Scroll down, and now the section title is showing up. So underneath of here, we are going to use the div that has the class of form container inner. So form container inner. And then in here, we are going to have an h6 that has the class of title, as well as the class of newsletter title. And then we can just say subscribe to Newsflash. Then underneath, we are going to have a p tag that has the class of newsletter description. And then we can just generate some dummy text. Let's make this a lot smaller, like so. And then we are going to have the form itself. Then we can just repeat what we had before. So input that has the class of form input, type of text, and then for the placeholder, we can just use subscribe. Or let me just check if that's what I had before. And actually, we had enter your email. So that's what we are going to do. Enter your email address. Then we had the button. So that's going to be a button that has the class of btn and form btn. Type will be of submit. And then we can just use an icon inside of here, RI, mail, and then send line. Just like so. And again, notice how we already have the styles because we are just reusing this from the previous form. And that's going to be it for this one. Let me just create some additional spacing here for separation, just so that the text is more readable. So let's go ahead and go inside of the CSS so that we can style the title as well as the text that we have here. And let's find the comment. And we are going to start by selecting the newsletter. And I'm going to give it a padding top. Actually, not a padding top, but padding bottom of 6 rem. And then I'm going to select the newsletter title. And this is going to have the font size, which is going to be LG. Then I'm going to select the newsletter description. And this will have a margin bottom. Should be margin bottom. And this is going to be 3 rem. And that's going to give us some more separation between the text and the form. And that's pretty much it for this section. The next section is going to be the footer. So let's go back inside of the index.html and let's begin. So we're almost there. The only thing we have left after this, obviously, is going to be the CSS for the footer, and then the blog post page, as well as the CSS for that page. And then we can finally move on to the media queries so that we can make the website responsive and finish the project. So for the footer, we are going to be using the footer element, and we will apply the class of footer as well as the class of section. And then we will have a div that has the class of footer container as well as the class of container. And then we will have the class of dgrid, since this one is going to be a grid container as well. And then in here, I'm going to have a div. This div is going to have the class of company data. And in here, we are going to have all the data that you see here. So it's going to have the logo, a brief description, social media icons, and then the copyright notice. So to begin with that, what we have to do is just add in the logo. Since we already have the logo here, let's just go ahead and scroll all the way back to the top. And let's just grab this. Then we can go back inside of the footer and paste it down here. Then we are going to have a p tag that has the class of company description. And then here again, we can just use some dummy text. So let me just copy what I have here. Paste it in here. And then we can just go ahead and add in the social media icons. So for that, I'm going to have a UL that has the class of list and the class of social media. Then we will have an LI that has the class of list item. Then we will have the anchor tag, list link, And finally, inside of here, we will have each individual icon. So the first one is going to be for Instagram, or Instagram, and then line. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now we see the icon. Then we can just go ahead and copy this down below as many times as you need. And now all we have to do is just change the classes. So for this one, we can do Facebook, circle, line. And then the third one is going to be for Twitter. And the last one is going to be for Pinterest. And now we have all the icons that we need. So the last thing that we need here is going to be the copyright notice. So this is just going to be a span that has the class of copyright notice. And then we just use ampersand copy 2021. Well, we're actually in 2022 by now. And this should be a semicolon. And now that's just going to generate the little copyright icon. So next we can just do newsflash. All rights reserved. Then the next thing that I want to do is have another div, and this is going to be for the content that we have here. So we want to group them together. And where was I? So outside of this company data div, we want to have another div, and this div is not going to have any classes. This is only for the purpose, since we are using grid here on the main container, we want to group them together just so that the titles here are also together and not like all spread around this container. So what we have to do next is inside of here, we will have an h6 that is going to have the class of title as well as the class of footer title. And then we can just have any name depending on whatever footer items you want. This one, I called it categories. Then underneath, I have another UL that has the class of list as well as the class of footer list. And the second class of footer list is just so that I can override some of the styles that the list has without having to impact every single list. Then again, li list item, anchor tag list link. And then for the text, we can do anything. In this example, I'll just do the same text everywhere else. So I'm actually just going to do sample item. And now we can just copy it down below as many times as we need. So in this situation, I'm doing about, let me just do 6. So now that we have the base for every single item, it's as simple as just copying this one. And now I'm going to paste it underneath 2 more times. So we have a total of 3 of them, just like so. And just to make it a little different, let me change the titles. So here I can say company. And then for this one, what did I actually call it? I can't remember. So here we have company, useful links. And that's going to be it for the markup for the footer. Let's go ahead back inside of the main.css and let's style this up. So the first thing that I'm going to do is select the footer. The footer is going to have a background color, which is going to be the secondary background color. Then the footer container. And this will have a gap. Then as far as the company data, we want to do a display of flex here, then a flex direction of column to bring it back down, flex direction, and the next thing that I want to do in here is change the order by moving this data all the way to the bottom. So we can do order of 1, and that's going to move it down. And I know where you're thinking, why is it going to the second place if the order is set to 1 and not just stay up here? Well, that's because it starts with 0 and not 1. So technically, number 0 would be the first one. Then I'm going to select the company description. And this will have a margin block. And I'm going to do the margin SM. Then the max width here that I'm going to set is going to be 75%, just to limit how wide it's going to stretch to. The next thing that I'm going to select is going to be the social media. And here I'm going to set a margin bottom. And this one is going to be the margin MD. Now I'm going to select the copyright notice. And I'm going to turn the opacity down just to make it slightly lighter. Now I'm going to select the footer list. Now I'm going to select the footer list. And this will have a flex direction of column. Then I'm going to align items to flex start, just like so. And then I'm going to select the footer title. And what I'm going to do here is change the font size to, maybe I'll do font size MD. Text transform is going to be of uppercase. And then a margin bottom for additional separation of margin SM. And that's looking pretty good. Well, we have an issue here, so that's going to be within the markup. Let's go ahead and find it. So useful links. It must have happened when I changed the text here. So that was the issue right there. Now everything looks pretty good. So the next thing that I'm going to do now is style the scroll bar. Let me make a comment here. Scroll bar styles. And what I want to do here is select the scroll bar. So for that, we actually have to use a prefix, WebKit, scroll bar. And I'm going to change the width to 1 rem. Then what I'll do is select the scroll bar track. And in here, I'm going to change the background color to F1, F1, F1. Then I'm going to select the scroll bar thumb. And this will have a different color. So background, and then 3, F4, 2, 5, 4. Then I'm going to select the scroll bar thumb when it's being hovered and add another color to it. So in fact, we can just copy this, paste it down here, and now we can just add hover to it. And the color that I'm going to add here is going to be slightly darker. So 2E30 and then 3B. And as you can see, if we hover over it here, it shows up. Maybe I could do 1.5 to make it slightly bigger. That's actually fine, so I guess we can just keep that. Although in the demo, it's smaller. Well, it's not a big deal, so I guess we can just keep it at 1. And now we can go ahead and work on the blog post page. So let's open up the sidebar, Control B, and then open up the post.html. So as you can see here, I'm already including the header markup, as well as the search, and then the footer, because this is content that every single page is going to have in common. So we have to include it. So if we navigate to the page, here you see the header, as well as the footer, and then everything else still works the same. So the focus here is going to be in between this blog post comment and the footer comment. This is where all the blog post markup is going to go. So let me close this and everything else that we don't need. And what we are going to do here is start by having a section that has the class of blog post, as well as a class of section header offset. And if you remember, this class is going to move a particular section that is next to the header down enough so that it's not sitting underneath. So then what we are going to do here is have another div, and this div is going to have the class of blog post container. And let's also apply the container class. And underneath of this, we are going to have another div, and this div is going to have the class of blog post data. So this is going to be the container for all the data that we have right here. And then we can just repeat what we have used before, which is well, before that, let's add in an h3 that has the class of title, as well as the class of blog post title. And then we can just repeat the title here. And under here, what we are going to do is say that we want a div, and this div is going to have the class of article data. And then we will have 3 spans as we did before. The middle one is going to have the class of spacer. I can't even remember what I called this, so let me just quickly double check. So we had, let's quickly find it in one of the articles here. So article data. So article data spacer, that's what we called it. So let's use it here. And then here we can just add and then this is going to be the estimated read time. So that's going to be the base for that. So still within this blog post data, we need to also have an image. And this image is going to be underneath of this article data div. So for that, we will use an image, and this image is going to be found inside of the assets folder, images folder, and then featured 1. So let's see how that looks. It looks good so far. And let me just make sure that I have this one correct as well. So let's go all the way back to the top. Header. So section header offset. And there we go. Now it's under it. So let me close the sidebar now, and we can continue. So this one is going to be for this one. Let's go underneath. And in here, we want to have an inner container because we want to limit this even further when we're on larger screens. So we will have a class of container here applied to a div. And inside of this div, we are going to have a p tag, some dummy text, and then we can just repeat that underneath. Let me just add some separation here so that the text is more readable. Then we are going to have a block quote, which is going to be this. And for this, we can just use the block quote element. And let's apply a class of quote. And here I'm going to have a p tag, and then I'm going to have a span. This span is going to have an icon inside of it, which is going to be for the quotation marks. So this icon is going to have a class of array double quotes L. So let's take a look at that. And now we see the icon showing up here. Then after this span closing tag, we are going to add some additional text. And in fact, we don't really want a lot. So what I'll do is just copy a portion of this. Let's say about here, and then paste it in here. And then we can just repeat the same thing for the span so that we get the closing quotation mark. So the only difference here is that we have to change the icon here so that it's facing the left. And this one, we can just change it from L to R for right, just like so. And then we just repeat the same p tag that we have here underneath. And now we can go ahead and add the card itself. So this card is going to be inside another div. It's going to be inside another div. It's going to be inside another div. And we are going to call this one author, and then we will make it a grid container. And here we are going to have a div, and this div is going to have the class of author image box. Inside of it, we will have an image. And this image is going to have the class of article image. And we can find it inside of the assets folder, images folder, and then it's going to be the author.jpg. So let's scroll down here. Now we can see the image. And then we can go underneath of this author image box div. And now we will have another div that has the class author about. And in here, we will just have a description of the author, including the name and so on. So it will be in H3 that has the class of author name. Then, well, we can use John Doe here. Then we will have a p tag. This p tag is going to have some dummy text as well. Let me make this smaller. And under the p tag, we will have the social media icons. And in fact, something that we can do is just borrow it from here, since it will be basically the same thing. And then we can just paste it here. Let me see, how many did we have? We had Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So I guess we don't need the last one. And yeah, that's pretty much everything that we need for the markup as far as the blog post. So now let's go inside of the CSS file and style up this page. So we will begin here by selecting the blog post. And I'm going to give this a padding bottom of 5 rem. Then I'm going to select the blog post data. And I'm going to give this a display of flex. Then flex direction, column. And then I want to align items to the center. I'm going to do the same thing for the text align. And then I'm going to apply a padding block of 2.5 rem. And then I'm going to select the blog post title. And here what I want to do is add responsive typography. So I'm going to say font size, and then I'm going to use clamp. So here, what I'll do is specify a minimum font size. Then in here, I want to set a font size that is going to adjust based on the viewport width. So in this situation, I'm going to do 5 BW. And then this right here is going to be the maximum size. So for example, if we go ahead and test that out, and let me just make sure that I grab the right handle. And even then I still wasn't able to grab it. Notice how the size of the font is growing. And once it gets to that 6 rem, it just stops growing altogether. So that's a way that you can set responsive typography. Underneath, what I'm going to do is select the blog post data. And then I'm selecting the article data that's inside of it. And this will have a margin bottom, which is going to be 2.5 rem. Then I'm going to select the blog post data image. The width here is going to be 100%. The height is going to be the item min height SM. And then object fit cover. We also want to set an object position here. And it will be center 10%. Just like so. Then I'm going to select the blog post container. And then the container that is inside of it. So this would be this container that we have here inside of this blog post container. And here I'm going to set a max width. This max width is going to be 90 rem. So that's as large as it will get. Then I'm going to get rid of the padding that we have by default on the container class. And then this will be a display of flex, display flex. And then here we want to change the flex direction back to column. And then we are going to apply a gap, which is going to be the gap variable that we have. And that's just going to basically add some spacing between all of our items, as you can see here. So the next thing that I want to do is style up the quote. The quote is going to have a background color, which is going to be the secondary background color. And it will also have a padding all around of 2.5 rem. Then underneath, I'm going to select the quote paragraph. And I'm going to set the font style to italic. Then I'm going to select the quote span. And this will have a font size of 5 rem. So that's going to make the quotes here larger. And I should be selecting the span I, just like so. Although that's actually pretty large. Let me make it smaller. Let's do something like half. It's actually too small, so let's do 3.5. And that's better. So now I'm going to select the author element, or the element with the class of author. And I'm going to apply a margin top of 5 rem and then a gap, which is going to be the gap variable that we already have. Then we can go ahead and add a background color, which is going to be the secondary background color. Let me just scroll down so that we can see what's going on. But we can't see much of it right now because of the large image. So let's sort that out. Author image box. And all we have to do here is just give it a position of relative. So if we scroll up, now we still can't see it, but we're going to be fixing that shortly. Now the height is going to be item min height sm, just like so. Then I'm going to select the author about, and this will have a padding all around of 1.5 rem. Then display will be a flex, and flex direction here will be column. And then in here, I'm going to apply a gap of 1 rem for separation between the content that we have here. Now I'll select the author name, and this will have a color, which is going to be the light color, followed by font weight, of 400. The next thing that I'm going to select is going to be the author paragraph. And this will have a max width of 50 rem and a margin bottom of 1 rem. Finally, we are going to select the author social media. So author about, and then the social media element that is inside of it. You just scroll down a little bit more. And here, what we want to do is set the margin top to auto. And what this will do is that when we have a lot more room towards the bottom, this social media container is going to move as far as it can to the bottom without touching this. And then I'm also going to get rid of the margin bottom that we have here by setting it to 0. So now comes the fun part. This is where we make the website responsive. So under the media queries, we will do a media and then screen, and we do min width, followed by the breakpoint that I'm going to be using, which is going to be 700 pixels. Then here, what I want to do is target the trending news box. And let's go back to the main page so that we can see what's going on. I'm also going to go ahead and make this smaller, back to 100%, just so that it's easier to show the breakpoints. So this is going to be for the trending news box, which is this one right here. And what I'm going to do here is change the flex direction to row. Then what I'll do here is add align items to the center. And we still can't see it because we're not at the 700 breakpoint. But there we are. Then I'm going to select the trending news image box. And this will get a width of 50%. So now things are going to fit better. Now I'm going to select the trending news data. And the margin here is going to be set to auto. So now this will move towards the middle. Text align here will be center as well. Then I'm going to select the newsletter description. So let me scroll back down to the newsletter right here. So newsletter description. And the max width here is going to be set to 40 rem. And then for the form container inner, I'm going to set and align items here of center, just like so. Then for the popular tags, well, the popular tags actually come before this, so let me just move up. For the popular tags container, as well as the footer container, what I'll do here is just change the layout. So now we're going to have sets side by side. So what I'll do is say grid template columns. I want to use the repeat function, and then I want to specify how many times I want this repeated. So I want it 2 times, and it's going to be 1 fraction each. So now you can see that they're both side by side. Then for the company data, which is this right here, I'm going to change the order back to the first one, so 0, and that's going to place it over here instead. Then if we go back to the blog post page, here I'm going to select the author, and I'm going to set a grid template columns here. So the first side is going to be 25 rem. That's the side for the image. And then the other one is going to be 1 fraction. So as much space as it can. And that's going to give us a better layout. And notice how the margin auto down here is coming into play by pushing it all the way to the bottom. So let's now work on the second breakpoint. Let me just grab this, paste it underneath, and then I can just go ahead and close this. So the second breakpoint is going to be for tablets. So I'm going to change this one to 768. And when it comes to choosing your breakpoints, all you have to do is just go on the responsive view. So let me just make this bigger. So for example, you go on the responsive view, and then all you have to do is just use the handle to stretch the viewport here and just kind of figure out where the layout breaks. And then that's going to allow you to choose a breakpoint where you can correct that issue that you're currently having with the layout breaking. So let me quickly close that, and let's go back to working on the second breakpoint. So let's go back to the main page, and this is going to be for the featured content. So featured content, and here I want to set a grid template columns. So I want this to be repeated 4 times and then 1 fraction each. Then what I want to do is specify some grid template rows, and grid template rows. Here, I want to say that the first one is going to be 5 rem. So that's going to be for this banner. Then the other ones, I'm going to repeat them 4 times, 1 fraction each as well. Don't worry, it still looks messed up, but it's going to make a lot more sense soon. So let me just make this bigger so that I have a chance to open up the responsive view here. And then if we go here and take a look at the grid, and what we can do now is basically position the elements where we want them to go. So as far as the headline banner, what I'll do here is set a grid column, and then I want to say start at 1, so that's going to be the first line, and stretch all the way across here to -6. So for this, we can just do -1. And now notice how the layout is correcting itself. And this, let me just remove this so that it's more visible. Now the banner is stretching all across. Then what I'll do is stretch it further down. So I'm going to set a grid row, and then I'm going to tell it start Actually, not a grid row. I'm going to be doing that on the other ones, not this one. What I want to set here is a font size, which is going to be the font size SM. So now I'm going to select the featured article. And this one is going to have a grid column. It will start at 3 and then stretch all the way to the end, just like so. Then for the grid row, I'm going to say start at line number 2 and finish at number 4. Then I'm going to select the featured article number 1. This is me selecting them individually. Should be number 1. And then here I'm going to set a grid column telling it to start at 1 and finish at 3, like so. Let me copy this, paste it underneath. And now I'm going to change this to number 2. And for number 2, well, actually for number 2, we don't need it because number 2, it's already sharing the styles that we just applied to every single featured article here. However, the one that we do need is number 3. And this one is going to start at number 1 and then stretch all across to the end, just like we did here with the banner. Then what I want to do is tell it to start on the grid row at 4 and finish at 6, just like so. And notice how we went from a boring layout to this really nice looking layout that we have now. So we can close this for now. And the next thing that I want to do is target the older posts. So here, older posts, and then the article inside of it. And here I can say grid template columns, the first one 25 rem and the rest 1 FR. So now we get a similar card as to what we had for the blog post for the author card that we have. Then underneath, I'm going to select the older post article image wrapper. And the height is going to be set to auto. The next thing that I'm going to do is target the blog post data image. And here, what I want to do is change the height from SM to MD, just like so. And let's not forget to close this so that it works. And now you see that it does. And that's going to be it for this breakpoint. Now we move on to the third breakpoint. So again, as we did before, let me just copy this one so we don't have to type it again. Paste it down here. And all we have to do now is change the breakpoint. So here we do 1024. And in here, we are going to reset the menu. So I'm going to change the position to initial, then the width to initial as well, padding, initial, background color, transparent, and then the opacity, initial, and we will do the same thing for the transform. So the next thing that I'm going to do is target the list that is a direct child of the menu element. And here, the flex direction will be changed back to row. So now we have to hide these two buttons for the sign in and sign up, since we are in the desktop screens now. And to do that, all we have to do is say screen LG hidden. And now we can say display none. And it's gone. So now what we have to do is show the other two buttons that we had on the side. So if I make this smaller here, these two buttons. And to do that, we just select the opposite class that we had for this, which was screen SM hidden. And then we do a display of block, like so. So the only thing we have to do here is style this button to make it look like the fancy button that we had before. And to do so, first, I'm going to select the sign up BTN. And this will now get a padding all around of 0.4 rem. And now the background is going to show up. We still have to animate this button on hover. So for that, we are going to be creating a keyframe animation. So we will do add keyframe, and then the name here, I'm going to call this animate border. And then we usually have a starting position and then an ending position. So you can say from like 0, then anything in between to 100%, or any amount, to be honest. But here I'm just going to do 2, which is basically going to be the ending position, because you can have from basically saying start here and then to end here. So 2, what I want to animate here is the transform, translate x, then negative 50%. And that's pretty much it. So all we have to do now is just add this animation on hover. So here I'm going to select the BTN that has the class of fancy border. And I'm going to say that on hover, I want to target the before pseudo element. And then here I set the animation property, then followed by the name of the keyframe animation, which is going to be animate border. I'll say over 0.75 seconds, the animation is going to be linear and it will be infinite. So if we go ahead and test that out, well, it's not working. Let's see if we can find the issue. So here, selecting the BTN that has the class of fancy border on hover, and then we target the before pseudo element and apply the animation. So let me just go ahead and try this by itself. By the way, the reason why I do the BTN is because I want the effect to only, well, it's working there. But yeah, I was saying that I only want this effect to apply to this button and not this right here, because if you remember correctly, this also has the fancy border class. So that tells me that the issue comes from the BTN. So let's go back inside of the index.html, make this larger. And if we scroll down here, find the button. Well, here we can see that I have BTT as opposed to BTN. So I'm assuming I have the same mistake here as well. And yes, we do. So let's correct that. And now we can just go ahead and close all of this, since we are only going to be working within the CSS file now. So let's make this smaller. And now if we go ahead and test that out, this doesn't work, which is exactly what we want. But this should now work, and it does. So moving on, the next thing that I want to select is the featured articles container. And here, what I want to do is apply a grid template columns, 1 fraction, and then 40 rem, which is going to be for this side. So now they're going to be side by side here. Then what I want to do is select the trending news image box. And this is going to get a width of 10 rem, a height of 10 rem as well. And then what I want to do is select the popular tags container right here. And what I want to do in there is set another grid template columns, repeat 3 times, 1 fraction each. Then for the next one, this is going to be for the footer container. So I guess we can just copy this, paste it down below. In this one, we can just change the name to footer container. And this one is going to be repeated 5 times instead. Just like so. Now we have to correct this because obviously it doesn't look right at all. So since we are now spanning 5, what I can do here is target the company data. And what I can say is that the grid column, I want it to span by 2 because we have 4 items. So let me just comment that out now. So let me just comment that out for now. So here we have 4 items, but now we are basically saying that we want this repeated 5 times. So we don't have enough room to fill every single one. So it just stays like that. So what we do here is just span this one by 2. So now it makes up for the space that we have here empty. And it just looks a lot better, as you can see. Now I'm going to select the company description. And this is going to have a max width of 85%. So it's just going to stretch out a little bit more. Now for the copyright notice. Here I'm going to give this a margin top of auto, and it's going to push the text all the way to the bottom. Finally, I'm going to select the blog post data image. So let's go back to the blog post page. So blog post data, and then the image inside of it. And the height here is going to be 40 rem, like so. Now we can go ahead and move over to the next breakpoint. And this breakpoint is going to be at 1200 pixels. And what I want to do here is very simple. I just want to modify the older post grid wrapper, which is this one right here. Since now we have plenty of room, what we can do is say older post grid wrapper, grid template columns, and then I want to repeat this 2 times, 1 fraction each. So if we go ahead and make this bigger, you'll see that now we get the layout that we want. Then what I want to do is add another breakpoint, and this one is going to be at 1500 pixels. And then I only want to focus here on the featured article. And what I'm going to do here, so featured article, is set the grid template column to start at 3 and stretch all the way to the end. Obviously, we're not going to see any changes there because we are not in a large enough view. But if we made it bigger, now you can see it. Well, you can't see it because it's being messed up. We have to correct it. And to do so, what we have to do is select featured article number 1. And then I can say here grid column 1 and a 3. And then for the grid row, we can say start at 2. And as you can see here, now this portion is a lot larger and stretches all the way towards the bottom. Now let's just make sure that everything still works. So looks good so far. This as well, change the theme. Local storage still works. And well, there's an issue here. As you can see, it's not changing to the appropriate color, because if we went back to the original project, this should be blending in with the same color as the navigation for the header and everything else we have here. So let's go ahead and go back inside of Visual Studio Code. And since this is related to the light theme, all we have to do is just come here. And well, this is the issue right here. This should be the light color instead. So light, and this one should be dark. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And it works, but we still don't have the right color, as you can see. And that's because this one should be the same as this one. So now it should work. Well, it's still broken because once it switches to the black color, the title should be white. So let's take a look at the hover effect for the article, which should be somewhere around here. Oh, that's because I did not add it in. So article on hover, we want to target the article title. And what we want to do here is just change the color to be the transparent. Why is it the light color? No, actually it was the hover light color. So let's go ahead and test it out. And as you can see now, everything works perfectly and everything else still looks good. So let's check out the responsiveness. So right here, this is the mobile view. The navigation still works. This as well. If we scroll down, everything still looks good. Let me check out the swiper. And let's now adjust the viewport width, and everything still scaling properly. And yeah, it looks like we are done. So if you guys enjoyed this video tutorial, make sure to show me some love. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and hopefully I can clarify any doubts that you might have. Feel free to also check out the completed files just in case you run into issues, as I mentioned at the beginning, so that you can fix them a lot faster and not have to wait for a response. Other than that, I'll catch you guys in the next one.